Ones and zeros code was challenge, let's get started. Given an array of ones and zeros, convert the equivalent binary value to an integer. For example, 0001 is treated as a string, which will be a binary representation of 1. So let's see how we can go from this value to this value using these examples. So let's take the most complicated approach, which is this one equals to 15. How binary works is going from right to left, each column is multiplied by 2. We always start at 1, and 1 times by 2 is 2, 2 times by 2 is 4, and 4 times by 2 is 8. So what that means is, this column is 8, then it goes 4, then 2, then 1. So in order to get 15, it says here we have 1. And 1 means we actually have this column, and 0 means we don't have this column. So in this case, we actually have all of the numbers inside the columns. So we have an 8, a 4, a 2, and a 1. 8 plus 4 is our 12, plus the 2 gives us 14, plus the 1 gives us 15. Let's take the 11 example. We have 8 plus nothing, which is that will be our 4 equivalent. Then we have our 2, so 8 plus 2 so far is 10, plus the 1 gives us 11. As for 6, we have 0 8s, 1 4, 1 2, and 0 1s, so 4 plus 2 gives us a 6. So now that we understand the theory behind it, let's see how this works in terms of code. So the easiest way to do this is to actually traverse through the array backwards. If we traverse forwards, we'd have to know how many values you have inside here and then count, which we can easily do, but it just makes the code and the math a lot more complicated. So if we went left to right, we'd have to first count how many. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then just say 1 times 2 times 2 times 2, which will give us the 8, and then we start 8 and then do our division going down. Alternatively, you can actually start at the top of the array and then multiply it by 2 as you go through. So it'll be this value times by 1, this value times by 2, this value times by 4, then this value times by 8, and add up all together and you should get your answer. So let's see how this looks. First, I'm just going to sort this indentation out, just like this, and let's get started. Because we're going to be returning back an integer, let's first have an int total, and make that equal to 0, and at the end of the function, we can just say return total. And then inside the body, we're going to have a for loop that will go through our array. So for int equals I equals 0, I is less than the binary array dot length, because we want to go through all the elements, and we can do I++. And of course, we can write our code in the middle. Now with this approach, we're actually traversing it forwards, not backwards. So in order to convert this into a backwards array, to use I and start at the length and go to 0, we need to essentially do the opposite. So let's duplicate this just to look at it side by side. So we don't want I to start at 0, we want it to start at the length. But the problem with that is we can't just start at the length, we have to start at the length minus 1. Because with arrays, it's 0 base. So you have 0 to 4, it might have a length of 4, but the end position is actually 3. So therefore, if we say int I equals binary length, then it's going to try and do 0 to 4, as we have 4 positions down here. But our target is not actually 4 positions, our target is 3. So we do the binary length minus 1. And let's maximize this. So then what we can do inside here is say int I equals binary length minus 1. And instead of saying I is less than binary length as we have here, we actually need to flip it to greater than or equal to, and then the last index is going to be our 0, so we can just type 0 inside here. And because we're going from 3 all the way down to 0, we need our I minus minus instead of I++. So it'll go 3, 2, 1, 0, and then it'll finish the for loop. Perfect. So what we can do inside here is we can say our total variable equals our total variable plus, and then we need to do a multiplication. So in terms of the first value, it's going to be something like 1 times by 1. This value will be our binary array. And this value is going to be something that we need to calculate, which will be the columns. So if you remember, our columns go 8, 4, 2, and 1. So this value is what's going to be inside the array. So it's going to be something like this. So this value here is going to be the bottom column, and this value here is going to be the top column. So we need to work out every single time we go through the loop what this value is going to be times by, e.g. this 1. So let's make another variable. We can say int times and make it equal to 1, because our first one is equal to 1. Now every time we go around this loop, we need to times it by 2. 1 times 2, and then take that value times by 2, take that value and times it by 2. So what we can do here is we can say times is equal to times multiplied by 2, to keep a running total. And then this value is now our top column, which we have a variable for, which will be our times variable. So let's just have a little recap of this before we proceed. So we have an int total and we return it at the end. We're doing a for loop but going backwards through the array. Int I equals the length minus 1, as we demonstrated here why the minus 1 is very handy, and then we're stopping at 0, and we're going backwards so we need I minus minus. The times variable needs to contain 1, then 2, then 4, then 8. And then because we're going through our array backwards, we're going this order, which would be perfect because we're starting at 1 and then going to 8. So what this calculation now means is we need to take our running total, make that equal to our running total, add the new calculation. So this will be times, which should be equal to 1, and we're doing 1 times by 0, and then adding that on, and then next for loop will be 2 times by 0, 4 times by 0, and 8 times by 0. Of course, these are the values I've just typed in at random, but these will be the values that get returned from the array. So if it's all going to be 1s, then this is going to be the total plus 1 times by 1, star inside here. Then when it loops back around, it's going to be 2 times by 1, then 4 times by 1, then 8 times by 1, and because it's doing total equals total, then this is going to keep a running total of all the values, and then we can return it at the end. So let's run this and just see if it works. So if we hit test bottom right, perfect, so it seems like it has worked. So let's see what we can do inside here to make the code slightly better. Throughout the course of my channel, I've showed you how to be able to do plus equals. And what plus equals does do is it'll stop you from having to repeat yourself like here. Total equals total. If you know that you're going to keep a running total and you can see that the value here is an addition, then all you can do is remove this side and just make it a plus equals. And then we don't need the brackets anymore and it can just be simple like this. And this expands to exactly the same line. Total equals total plus whatever this side is going to be. And we can actually do the same thing with this line as well. Instead of having times equals times times 2, then we can take this and just do times equals 2. And this does exactly the same thing. So now let's make sure it still works by hitting test again. Perfect, it's still working. Now what you can do with for loops is, this part of the for loop actually tells you what needs to happen every single time you go through the for loop. It's saying please decrease the value of I by 1 every single time. But we also have something inside here that needs to be changed every single time. So we can actually place a comma and we can write that line, times equals 2. And what that will do is it will replace our need to have it down here. It means that every time the for loop loops around, it will run this line and also run this line together, and therefore decrement in I and increment in times by a multiplication of 2. So let's run that and make sure it still works, hit test, and there you go, it still works. So I know I went a little bit quick there, so let's just have a little recap before we continue. So we don't need to do total equals total plus this calculation, just as shown here. So if we duplicate this, I can bring it back to how it was before, total plus, and then let's put this inside the brackets. These two lines are actually identical. The plus equals just means you don't have to state total plus again, and you can just keep it as plus equals. As for this line, the concept is very, very similar. So in here, we would normally do times equals times 2, but now you can do times star equals 2, and what that means is it will just stop you from writing times equals times. It's just a little bit of a shorthand. Now we actually took that one step further, and because we're doing this very simple calculation every single time the for loop goes around, we can actually type it straight inside here, and it just means our for loop is actually just one line. So if we were to remove all of the comments, you'll actually see that our solution is fairly short. We have the total, the times, our for loop declaration, and just our simple calculation and then our return. I will undo the comments just so you have them for reference, but there you go. So now if we run that to make sure, perfect. And now if we actually press attempt, it should give us some more tests that it goes through. There you go, more tests and random tests, and it seems that they've all passed. Hope that video made sense. If you have any code wars challenges that you want me to solve, drop them in the comments or in the Discord server and I'll be happy to do that. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. This video was made possible by my awesome Patreons DP Unique, Tominator, BuddyWoody9 and Rohan. Thank you for your continued support. I have a C# Masterclass Udemy course coming up soon. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and join the Discord server for exclusive discounts and promotions.